All right, our fearless leader, Danielle Danis. Welcome.
Well, thanks for inviting me today.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I guess so. First off, a lot going on in the Fort McMurray area, but I do think the lessons that you're seeing from it are applicable to more than just one jurisdiction. So I guess first off, if you don't mind going a little bit into yourself, your position, and kind of what the situation is right now.
Okay, so I am currently the president of CUPE Local 2559, which represents approximately 500 members. We represent all the support staff within the Fort McMurray Catholic School Division, but our local also represents two other units, which are Children's First Daycare with about 15 members and about 40 or so members at WJS, which is an agency that provides support for adults with disabilities. Those two units are not involved with this current job action, but they are part of our local. So I just wanted to mention that. I've been the president for a really long time. 12, 15 years. I forget now. It's been a while. And I'm also the area vice president on the CUPE Alberta executive. So I represent all the area of Fort McMurray, which here in Fort McMurray, there's quite a few CUPE locals. 2545, which is our sister local at the public school board, 1505, which represents the city, and 2157, which is the Keano College. So
Okay.
we within the city. I just want to give a little bit of feedback on our union, just so that you kind of understand how we got to this place today. When I've been working for the district for 21 years, been a resident of Fort McMurray for 24. I'm originally was born in Quebec, but grew up in northeastern Ontario. Moved here in 2000, and after my youngest son started school, he was at the French school, which has full-time kindergarten. I decided to go back to work. I have a background, diploma in child and youth care, but also have a bachelor's degree in child and youth care. Working with youth at risk is what I used to do in Ontario, working in group homes. When I moved here, started working one-on-one with our special needs children, and eventually flowed into the literacy portion. I speak French, English, and Spanish, and also as union president, it was a little bit easier for me to book off some time. When I was doing literacy, I wasn't attached to a kid, so that's where I eventually flowed into that area. Also, I'm not 20 years old anymore, so our local way back when only represented the custodial maintenance staff of our school board, which is approximately 40 to 50 members. Years ago, students used to go to school 5 days a week. Eventually, due to different kinds of budget cuts, the school board implemented of 4-day weeks, so that in our school year, we technically have 13 full 5-day weeks. When that happened, students weren't going to school on those Fridays, and that also meant that support staff weren't working. The bulk of our support staff, which is the EAs, secretarial, maintenance, custodial, all of them continued to work, but we didn't. We were also working 6.5 hours a day at that time, and the employer decided to cut us back to 6 hours. They heard rumblings of us joining the union, so they gave us back 15 minutes, because during those cutbacks, we were the only group that was impacted. And so therefore we decided to join the union, and we became one group. Now our local is wall to wall, which is very, very good for us, which means custodial maintenance, admin assistants, out of school care, educational assistant, Indigenous liaison, and another big chunk that a lot of people didn't realize until this job action was TASs, which are the people who substitute but are not ATA members. They're not actual teachers, but they may have a degree in something else or have not completed their teaching degree as of yet. They are approximately 80 members. And I believe, and again, I premise this whole interview with I may be off by a little bit on numbers, but I believe there's only about 10 to 15 actual ATA people on the sub list at both districts. So the 80 that are TASs are a huge component when it comes to teachers needing to book time off. So when that happened, like I say, we became unionized. It impacted our salary. We get paid by the hour, and on most weeks we work 28 and a half hour weeks. So the employer even had to go to Alberta Blue Cross to redefine what a full-time employee was. So for a long time, we've been working, the bulk of our local has been working 10 months, but technically only getting paid 7.5 months out of those 10 when you consider all the holidays, teachers' convention, spring break. So that exacerbated, the situation. And so we have been right now working on this collective agreement. We've been without a contract since August 31st of 2020.
Okay. Short spell,
So
only
it's been
4 years.
only 4 years, but we have not had a wage increase in 10. So the last couple of contracts, we were able to negotiate a health spending account, increases to that, an increase from the employer paying 75% of our premiums for our benefits to 80, but there wasn't anything monetary. COVID hit us, so that kind of put a stall on things. But also, we were also hoping that in May of 2023 that a different government would be elected that's more public sector friendly. So we were kind of holding off, moving full force. Once the UCP government was elected again, we decided to go back to the negotiations full force. And kind of line up with our sister local at the public board to give us more impact. We had a couple rounds of informal mediation, and things didn't pan out well.
So what is informal mediation?
So informal mediation is when the government, the labor board will assign someone to a third party to come in and work between the two sides to try and come up to something that would be, agreeable to both sides. We did that informally in the fall of last year. I believe it was October, December. And
so is
then,
it kind of like the pigeon going back and forth between the two of you, almost? Okay.
Yeah, we're in separate rooms, and they go back and forth, to see where we would give and where they would give. Unfortunately, the employer was not budging and basically kept coming back to us, hoping that we would negotiate against ourselves. And that didn't pan out. And then we filed for formal mediation. We were hoping to have formal mediation in April to then, if strike action were to happen, it would be in May. The employer came back to us and said that they couldn't manage their schedules to be able to get everybody together at that time.
This is May of
last year.
And so who is the employer? Sorry. Who is
the Fort McMurray Catholic School Division is our employer.
Okay.
And so when we go into negotiations, usually what happens is that at the table, we usually have the financial officer for the school board, the person who is in charge of human resources. Sometimes that person is there more for note taking than anything else. And then there's a negotiator that the school boards hire. And in this case, in Fort McMurray, both school boards had the same negotiator. And
is that normal?
Well, we also have. Pardon me?
Is that normal? To have the same negotiator? Okay.
It can be, and because we're in Fort McMurray, where in a bigger city, they have more luxury to have a couple of different people. Here, it's more cost efficient for both of them to have the same person fly up and have our negotiations happen back to back. So I think that's part of the reason why they do that. It's beneficial and also a hindrance in the sense that the negotiator knows what's going on at both tables. And so that didn't pan out. They gave us dates in July, which we declined, and then they gave us date of August 21st for us and August 20th for the public school board, which was formal mediation, because there's certain steps that you have to follow before you get
Yep.
to a strike
So
vote or a strike.
let's look at, so you're looking at May 2023. You're starting informal mediation. Is that correct?
No, informal would have been October and December of 2023. We
Okay.
wanted to start, we asked for formal mediation in the spring, hoping to get a date in April, so that strategically, if job action were to take place, it would take place in May, where, high schools have exams, that kind of thing. Initially, the employer said May 30th, but that is very strategic on their part as well, because when I explain the process a little bit later on, you'll see why. Had we done it then, it would have taken us to job action happening at the end of June, which really doesn't have a lot of impact. Parents are ready for school to be out and go on vacation. So we refused that one, and then we had the one set in August. So August 21st, August 20th, they met with the public board. August 21st, they met with the Catholic board. And just so you know, at that time, we made a decision that myself, as president of on the Catholic side, would sit at the table on public, and the president for the public, CUPE, would sit at our table. We wanted to show a unified front. And so obviously nothing transpired. We gave them our bottom line, and
Which
they,
was?
so
Like, what were the things that you were asking for specifically in this one that you can
I'll
share?
give as much detail as I can.
Yep.
One of the things we were asking for was, so right now they pay 80% of our premiums for our benefits. We were asking for 100%. You have to know that the employer negotiates with us and also negotiates with ATA, so the teachers. And a lot of times when we want to bring something forth, they give us the excuse, well, we don't want to open that up here because then it can open up at another table, AKA with the teachers. They don't want to do anything with us that then the teachers could ask for. But when we ask for the same thing that teachers have, which 100% of their premiums paid, it gets kiboshed. The other thing that we were asking for was obviously a wage increase, substantial wage increase, but in light of inflation, just to give you an idea, when I did an inflation calculator, in order for me to keep up with inflation, my salary or my wage should be $7.84 more per hour than what it currently is. So just leave that with you there. The other things that we were asking for were, we have 2 personal days, which are days that we can take with pay for personal reasons that don't fall under any other category like bereavement or medical. And so we were asking for 4, and with the ability to carry over to the following year. Because right now, if you don't use them by the end of June, then you lose them. And sometimes, we would like to be able to carry some over. They refused to give us even one, but they said they'd allow us to carry over one of the 2 that we currently have. You have to understand that in Fort McMurray, we don't have, at our board, we do not have a list of substitute educational assistants. We do not have a list of substitute secretaries or admin assistants. We don't have a sub list. So whenever someone takes a personal day, honestly, there's no cost factor to the employer because they're not filling that position with somebody else because we don't have that sub list. So it's usually what happens is that another member has to take on the excess work or it just doesn't get done. So it's not a cost factor for them to give us an extra 1 or 2 personal days. Right now in our collective agreement, we get 2 paid with the option of having 3 others unpaid. So, it's in light of everything else, that's one of the things that they could have, easily done. We compare a lot with our sister board at public. They get more. They also get paid almost $2 more an hour. Now, and when this whole Friday situation happened years ago, their support staff at the time was given the option to work them or not, in or opt out. That's no longer the case, but they did have that option because they were unionized a lot longer than we were. The other big issue that um, is a big bone of contention with the majority of the support staff, like educational assistants, is so we have different categories. There's a two tiered pay scale, not two tiered in the sense that people get paid differently for the same job, but in a way, whatever education you come into, you start at a certain scale there. So if you have
Mhm.
just your 10-month EA certificate versus a 4-year degree, where you start at is a little bit different for your education. But as far as the job itself, it's based on the coding of the students that you're working with. So, for example, in our collective agreement, an EA4 is someone who works with the highest need students in the schools. So the children with autism, with diverse, needs, could be medical, where they're being tube fed, or those kinds of things. With the admin support, so the secretaries, for example, we have the admin 6 are the ones who basically run the office, do a lot of the financial stuff. Um, Same as we have head custodians who order and manage their people underneath them. In the EA department in particular, and also with some admin support, what happens is that because of shortage of staff, because they don't pay enough, because of people being overworked and taking more sick time and mental health days because they're overworked, what ends up happening is that a lot of times they'll pull someone who's an EA3. So I'm considered EA3 because I do literacy. So I get a lower pay than someone's at EA4. Um, if they are short and those kids need to have someone with them, then they pull someone from another program, and usually someone who's an EA3 or 2, and puts them in that position, but they don't get compensated for it. Okay, so they're a higher rate. And so in our collective agreement, what happens is that it has to be 3 consecutive days, and then on the 3rd day you get retroactive to day 1. But what ends up happening a lot of times is that they'll pick someone one day to work with them, then it'd be somebody else. So it's hard to get to that consecutive, or there's a discrepancy in what the meaning was originally when it first was put into what the employer views it now, where if they're only doing it, they get pulled for half a day. Well, that's not a full day. Or if they get pulled for an hour, that's not considered, eligible to get that paid. It's not a huge difference. If I remember correctly, it's around 70 cents, but it's enough that, but it's frustrating. We have to select our jobs at the end of the year, the educational support staff do. And a lot of people who are no longer spring chickens like myself don't want those more physical jobs because we've done it for years and years and years, and we want something that's more not as challenging.
Mhm.
I can't sit on a floor with, a child with autism and EAP anymore. Like I can sit down there,
Yeah.
but getting back up is going to be a story. So that is one of the biggest things that we've been asking for. And what the employer came back with was a very, very, very minimal, flat, one-time amount that's under $200, let's just say, for the entire year, is what they would pay those people who have it on a regular schedule. So again, the word regular would take away anybody that's get pulled here, a day there. It has to be
Mhm.
part of their, like some of them will do supervision at lunch, for example. So that one is a big thing, and it's been abused for years and years and years. And what happens with a lot of the stuff, the employer keeps moving the goalposts. What the understanding was when we went into negotiations is now being kind of shifted, and it's a little bit more gray. So those are the biggest
So
things
what
I
do
would
you
have to
mean
say.
by understanding that's shifted?
So, for example, I'll give you another example of something that's in there. In our collective agreement years ago, we put in that anybody who participates in swim programs, so some of our educational support staff, as part of their job duties, have to go swimming with their students. Okay, some of them go in our independent living program. So those are the highest needs children. They're in a different classroom in the schools, whether it be the high school or the elementary school. They go swimming sometimes twice a week. In the past, we used to have a lot more students in the EAP and kindergarten that would go swimming, and sometimes they would go swimming 9 to 10 times a year. The agreement at the time that that contract was put in was that anybody who participates in swimming can submit a receipt to the employer once a year for $125 for the cost of swimsuit or a towel or goggles or aqua socks. Because if you go swimming on a regular basis, the chlorine after a while eats away at your swimsuit. And so that was always there. Never had an issue for the longest time. Then all of a sudden I started hearing people saying, well, I submitted my receipts, but I didn't get reimbursed. And when we contacted the employer, then they changed the goalpost saying, well, it's only for the people that go like every week, not for those that go 9 to 10 times a year. So they started changing the criteria. That's not what was agreed upon when we signed off on the contract, back in 2020 or whatever it was. So that's the part that's frustrating. They keep changing the goalposts as to what the intention is. So we have to be extremely careful in our wording to make sure that, and it's the same people that were there when that contract was done. It's different if it would be all new staff down at the office, but it isn't. So the gentleman who brought that up was he's been there forever. So he knew what the intent was.
So if you don't mind
and
me
that's why it's
asking, and I don't
Yep.
want like names, but like if you were to look at, like, let's just say I had to renegotiate a contract tomorrow starting, who are like the position titles like in a district that you discuss? Is it mostly like financial staff? Or is it like the labor relations officer? Like who with the employer are you dealing with?
So at our board, we have the what is his official title, but the secretary treasurer of the school board, the person that does
Okay, so it
all the
is kind of like the
finances.
financial side. Okay.
Yeah. We don't have, and this is something we'd like to see change because they have it at the sister board. We don't have any of the school board trustees that come into negotiations where they do at the public board. And I think that's something that's extremely important because they are the ones who, the financial officer will go and present his report and they're the ones who have to, stamp it in the end. So that's something that we want to change because we don't know how much they're being told, so, what it's really like in the schools. So, it's something that we are going to request in our next round of bargaining that at least one of the trustees be there so they can know what's being told to us and what may be reported back to them may be different. So we just want to make sure that there's transparency on all sides. It protects not only us, but protects the employer as well. Right. So I think that'll be very important. Usually, like I said, HR is usually there also from a note-taking part, but also they can provide a lot of input on what they see from their end, right? So we have two HRs one is HR for human resources for the support staff, and we also have an HR for ATA for the teaching staff. We've had the ATA one in at times before. She hasn't been during this round, but that's totally fine. I'm trying to think in the past. In the past, sometimes the superintendent would sit in. That hasn't been the case yet so far, but we don't, because they have a negotiator, that person kind of takes the reins. Same as us. We have our CUPE national rep, Stephanie Lustig, who basically does the majority of the talking and the negotiating. I step in, or the VPs step in to, give further details or elaborate on a certain subject. All right. So where we are today, I've been telling the employer for a very, very long time that members are upset. I'm very passionate about what I do in representing the members. And I think that they underestimated and thought that I was being very hyperbolic about it, because I tend to be very passionate. And so you have to understand, because and yes, the cost of living, housing prices have gone down here in Fort McMurray over the years, but people's mortgages haven't. Like, people have bought, a lot of people are in upside down mortgages because, just before the fire, when the economy went down, then the fire and COVID and the flood we had, it's impacted the economy, but the housing prices have gone down, but people's mortgages haven't gone, they're still the same as what they paid their house for. We have several members who have declared bankruptcy, several who are in consumer proposals, and not because they were being stupid and silly with their money, but because interest rates. Some have variable interest rates. So when everything costs you, double or triple the price, but you're making the same wage as you were 10 years ago, they say like the dollar I made 10 years ago is now worth maybe 66 cents, maybe, if it's not further down. Let's take an example of something specific that a case of 24 Diet Pop, whatever, at Walmart used to be under $8, and now is $13.58 for the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And we even see it, and people say, "Oh, well, it's everywhere." But we actually, one of our members was in Cochrane, Alberta, in August, and brought back a flyer that her parents got in the newspaper. Same flyer here from Kentucky Fried Chicken, the same promo, but here in Fort McMurray, all the items were higher, but one in particular was $3 more, and that's coming from
And
a
that
store
comes
that's
to about
across.
20 to 25% when you act like you think $3.
Exactly.
Oh, but that's actually when you're looking at the
Exactly.
overall scope of change. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and also living in Fort McMurray, everything is more expensive, but also any kind of appointments with specialists or whatever, you have to go down to Edmonton. So
Yeah.
the cost of travel, the gas, your hotel, just everything can easily run you like $500 to $1,000 just to go
Easily.
for a
Yeah.
medical appointment, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, how we got to this point, we did the formal mediation in August, on August 21st, and of course things didn't change. The employer basically came back with nothing substantial and then wanted us to undercut what our bottom line was. And we said, no, we're not going to be bargaining against ourselves. We've already lowered a lot of expectations. And so then what happens is that the mediator at that time could propose recommendations, or could basically make a statement to the labor board that the sides are too far apart, which is what he did. The government, a little bit of background as well, to the government, Danielle Smith's government imposed a 2.75% wage maximum that the employer, all school boards could give their employees. Okay. And that
But
would
when
only
was
be
this?
retroactive. Oh, this year. And it's only retroactive. I think it was done in March, retroactive to January 1st of this year. That doesn't even come close to the bottom line of what the members are wanting.
Well, I'm trying to think, like, how is that kind of the classic of stripping you of your kind of leverage, because now you literally have a maximum that you can only bargain for, when really a union wants to bargain for 40%, they should be able to, because they're the union. Interesting. Okay.
Exactly.
So
And you have, it's so the same people that are, stripped of our rights basically are the ones holding the purse strings, right? So also to know as well, the UCP is very anti-union. They demonstrated that in 2020, I believe, in July, when they passed a bill, Bill 32, which basically puts a lot of red tape in what unions can and can't do with their dues. And so it's a union busting bill if you look at it, read the fine print. But thankfully we've kind of been able to work around some of that. But
in what ways did they kind of change what you were able to do and
so
not
it
do?
limits it's called Restoring Balance in Alberta's Workplaces. So basically right now,
I love the flowery language. Restoring balance. But yeah.
yeah. So basically right in the past, so our due structures work with the RAN system, where we have a percentage. Every local determines their percentage. Ours is not a lot. 1.75% of our members' wages go to union dues. that money is taken off their paychecks bi-weekly, but sent to CUPE National in Ottawa on a monthly basis. Those dues are also a tax deduction. It appears on their T4. So then as a democratic system, we pass, CUPE keeps their percentage and then deposits the rest to us, and that's what we use to function, do our union business that benefits everyone. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, some people may never have a use for a union, but we work it on the basis that our dues go to serve everybody. So the dues that we receive as a local help all our units. The other two that I mentioned as well, who are smaller, but if ever we have to file grievances or any of that kind of thing, it makes it easier for everyone as a whole. We work for the benefit of the majority. Obviously, when we make mandates or we have during our meetings, if someone brings forth a motion, it's voted on democratically. And we're able to use our union dues. We work from a bottoms up kind of union, and so following the guidelines of the Constitution, we will approve certain things. And one of the things that this bill does is, so for example, if a member was not in agreement of something that we were doing, they could turn around and file a complaint with the labor board and say that, okay, well, 5% of my 1.75% are going for donations to the food bank. I don't want that. Then they could opt out of that 5%.
Okay.
Okay, which would make it a logistical nightmare, not just for us, but also for the employer. It also forbids you from donating to any political groups. So we are affiliated with the Alberta Federation of Labor, the CUPE District Council, the Wood Buffalo District Labor Council. So those kinds of things. So it puts a lot of red tape and things. And fortunately, we haven't had any members that have objected to anything that we have done. But again, they vote on it. So it's not my decision, it's their decision. I'm just there representing them. So it's just a lot of red tape. And so it's a lot of it reminds me with a lot of the union bashing bills that take place in the US. So there's a lot of rhetoric that comes from our country below us, our neighbor below us, that I see coming up in a lot of things that the UCP government are doing. So that was implemented in 2020. And then this mandate on the school boards. Now, what makes it frustrating is that our employer is washing their hands and saying, hey, our hands are tied. We can't do anything. I mean, they could push it with the government and say, hey, we need more funding, but they're not doing that. Our sisters and brothers at 25.45, like I said, for EAs, for example, make almost $2 more an hour. And people say, well, how can that be? So for years and years and years, our board put money into reserves. And at the public board, they chose to use some of that money to give increases to their members, to their employees. Our school board, I don't know the exact number, but I've heard anywhere from $19 to $35 million that were in reserves. And what ended up happening a couple of years ago is that the provincial government, kind of in a nutshell, said to them, well, if you're able to put that much money in reserves, why are we sending you so much? Right? So they kind of forced them to spend it, but it wasn't allowed to go to wage increases. Where it got spent, I honestly don't know. And had they chosen back then to give it to wages, the government wouldn't have come back and said, I want you to get that money back from the employees, So they made that decision, and so it created
Like
the
a cowering
situation where we're
almost
now.
in a
Kind
don't
of,
piss off
yeah.
the big
It's
guy.
okay to have a
Yeah.
healthy bank balance, but it's the same as anybody who has a license with Alberta Gaming and Liquor Commission. You're a nonprofit. Well, you're not there to make money. It's good to have so much in your bank account, but you can't be hoarding all that money all the time. You have to be spending it for what you ask for that license for. So they're hiding behind that. But there are certain decisions that they've made locally that haven't been made elsewhere in the province. So I also sit on, I'm part of the Alberta Education Employees Committee, which is a subcommittee of CUPE Alberta. They have one for education, for healthcare, municipalities. There's a whole bunch of them. And whenever I talk to my fellow CUPE members from other education locals across the province, they can't believe how many Fridays that we have off.
Yep.
So that's a decision that was made here locally, that's a way of getting us back more money.
It's not your fault. Yeah.
Exactly. They can't blame that one, per se on the government. We're also, finding out that I won't give the name away, but at the public board, they hired their own internal IT people who are CUPE members at a substantial cost saving, whereas our board has a contract with a local company and pays in the last 3 years, it's in the 2-digit millions of dollars to this company, where that's a cost saving measure right there that could happen, right? So hire internally, they would not be paying that much money. So there's things that, we're looking at them doing to save money that would benefit their employees. Because what's happening now is we're at people are getting injured more frequently, have more sick time just because they're overworked and underpaid. So anyways, we went to formal mediation. That didn't work. And then what happens once formal mediation doesn't work? The mediator reports back to the labor board. Then you start a 14-day cooling off period. At which time, at any time during that process, we could go back to the table, but we weren't going to go back to the table if nothing had changed. That took us till, I believe, the very beginning of September. Once that 14-day cooling off period expired, we then made a notification that we were going to be holding a strike vote. That strike vote happened. We had it during 2 days. Now you have to remember, we've been doing everything together. Us and the Catholic board, the public board, everything's been together. When it came time to the vote dates, we were together. We were in the same hall. We had 2 different colored ballot boxes, 2 different colored ballots. We did everything together to show that solidarity. And we knew the results. We had it over two days, on a Tuesday and Wednesday. We knew the results, that we had a substantial percentage, but we weren't able to release those results until the labor board approved them. They hold off for 24 hours to approve them, to make sure that nobody comes forth saying there were any, I went to the polling station and the ballot box wasn't sealed or something like that. So they, on Friday the 13th, it was formalized, and immediately thereafter, the labor board sends a notification to us and to both school boards, giving them the amount of members who voted and the percentage. And we had a 98.1% in favor of strike, whereas our public brothers and sisters had 99.1%.
I didn't realize it was higher in that one.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and I'll be quite honest, it took a lot of, talking directly to members, especially for some of them who don't understand. And I'll just give you an example. Because we have members who come from other countries who are now, in Canada and are residents of Canada. Some of them come from countries where strike action means people getting killed, people, losing their jobs, a lot of that kind of thing. So, especially with some of our custodial staff, for example, they had heard rumblings of the school board hiring scab cleaning companies to come in during the evening to clean the schools if we were to go on strike. And a lot of them were concerned about their jobs. And we reiterated to them that we have very, very strong contracting out language in our collective agreement. And also, we also said to them, because there were about 50 in our local, we also said to them, do you honestly think that if the employer comes back to us with something that we would approve as far as from our side, that we would go back to work if we knew that they were now going to contract out our custodial maintenance staff? It would have been a definite no. We're working together, everyone. So that, that kind of helped them explain. So, and I think that the very, very minimal, that 1.9% that voted against are people who A, maybe didn't understand, or B, who financially can't afford it. None of us can, but we can't afford not to at this point.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the perfect storm. And so right across the province right now, there's approximately 250,000 public sector workers in bargaining. The government has caused this, and we're talking education, healthcare, a lot of 250,000. So I know for a fact that we're probably starting the ball rolling for the rest of a lot of education locals across the province. It's going to be a roll down effect. So we gave the official strike notice on the 13th of Friday the 13th for it to commence at 6 a.m. on Tuesday the 17th. And the reason why we say 6 a.m. is because our out of school care members start that early. Both myself and Lynn Fleet, who's president of the public side, went with our national rep to both school boards to officially hand them over the official strike notice. And at that time, we were, I believe that from the response, that they were surprised. I think they thought we were going to be doing rotating strikes where, one day it would be at this school, another. They were surprised when it was 100% of our services effective Tuesday morning. So we had a lot of, at the CUPE office here, we had, sign making things. People came out on Sunday, and it was very, very good to see all of us working together. We're sharing everything. We were prepared. We had Sign Up Genius for people to sign up for their picket duty, because during a strike, CUPE National, from day one, it's not a lot of money, but if you do 20 hours of work, of picket duty, and now I say picket duty in quotations because it could involve working in the office, because there's a lot of paperwork involved. They give $350 per week per member that does their 20 hours. And on top of that, CUPE National pays 100% of benefit premiums for members during a strike, so that no members are without any benefits. So they have a very, their national strike fund is in hundreds of millions of dollars. So they're prepared. There's 750,000 CUPE members across Canada. So we all pay into that strike fund. So it's there for us when we need it. So we were getting all set Tuesday morning to get out on the picket line. And we're at the CUPE office, and approximately 4:30, the very last minute, the Minister of Economy, Trades and Jobs sends the email to our CUPE National rep saying that they're imposing the dispute inquiry board on us, which is one of those things that hasn't been used in, I believe, over a decade, and is very, very, very seldom used. It has been used in the past by different governments, but it's in the bowels of the labor code that that's there. And basically what the dispute inquiry board does is basically stops us in our path for 30 days where we can't strike and the employer can't lock us out. And what they do is they appoint a neutral mediator again to try and resolve the differences, which we've already gone through all those steps. So needless to say, it was a gut punch. It was a gut punch.
Yep.
The government the week prior, stated that they don't get involved. It's between the school board and CUPE, blah, blah, blah. But then they turn around and do this. From from my understanding, it was also a surprise to the school board. So, it's not something that, from what we understand, that they concocted. The government did this. So now that happened. We reversed our way of thinking, and we started making picket signs with it's a robber on it that says, robbed of my right to strike, because it is our legal right. We went through all the processes legally and fairly, and then they imposed that on us. It has poked a bear that I don't think the government is aware of, with all labor unions, not only across the province, but across Canada. And so
Well, you're setting a massive precedent by being willing to go that low.
Yeah. So the mediator did come last Wednesday, and like we were expecting.
Walk me through this. Okay, like you've had a few weeks where you're kind of in like a new semi cooling period almost. Then you show up Wednesday. Like what's the energy like, and what's kind of the process of that evening?
So how it works is that the mediators, I believe, is in Edmonton. So it was all by Zoom. We went to our union office, and the school board was at their office, and we had this contraption called an owl. It was the first time I saw it. It's a speaker thing in the middle of the table, so that when whoever's talking, it looks like a little owl with eyes, and then you see your face on the screen. Everybody can see everybody. And the mediator, basically, we had a paper copy of the outstanding issues, because a lot of stuff we've signed off on already, the non-monetary. And he goes through each of those outstanding issues and has us speak on it, and then has the school board speak on it, and then we talk about each other's stance on that. And then
so first, what is the argument
it was very amicable.
But what is the argument for not adjusting the pay? Like, what are they saying to? Okay.
They say they have no money. They did, and hoarded it away for a long time, but they say they have no money, and they say that they're bound by the mandate from the government of the 2.75%. Now, I think that when we figured that out for like a custodial maintenance person, it's about 40 cents an hour. And for the higher up, I think it's around 71, 72 cents. Like, it's a slap in the face, right?
Yeah.
So, so they, they give their arguments back and forth.
Amicable environment, yeah.
Yeah. There was only one situation in regards to the swimsuit issue that, the other side thought, oh, I didn't know that was an issue, like da-da-da. It's been ongoing for 2 HR previous ago. So that kind of had us up in, the hairs in the back of our head going up, because the back of our neck going up, because it's been ongoing for years and years and years. And to just put it off as if first time they've heard about it is a total farce. It's been in the package all this time. But so basically go back and forth with the arguments either way. And I know that at one point the mediator had the school board people in a different room than us, as and so they didn't hear what we were saying. So he'll kind of talk to us and, what's your bottom line? What do you think the members would accept? And so we kind of gave him what that was, which I can't share publicly, and I'm sure they did on the other side as well. So now he wants to, he now goes back and gives his recommendations, which I believe they have until this coming Friday to do. The school board gives their input. Our national rep gives her report back. That gets all taken back from my understanding, to the minister. And then once it comes back to us, which hopefully will be around the 16th of October, the 30-day mark, or it could be before, we have to vote on it. Okay? So our members have to vote on whether or not they accept these recommendations. I'm not expecting anything to change. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, I'll be very surprised if it doesn't get rejected with the same percentage, if not higher.
Mhm.
So the members have taken a huge leap to get to this point. And it's like, when you're too far in, there's no way they're going back now.
Yeah.
So as hard and challenging as it's going to be, they're in it for the long haul. They find that support with each other. It's a huge thing. We also see it as a stall tactic because you know how it is. The end of mid to end October is getting colder in Fort Mac, and if they think that that's going to dilute our resolve, they're going to be very mistaken. What hasn't helped in all of this is the PR nightmare. Okay. So just to give a little bit of feedback, on Thursday, the 12th of September, this is prior to us having given the strike notice the next day. The school board didn't have any idea. Like, I don't think they expected as high of a percentage in favor of a strike as what we had. We literally had to count the votes 4 times that evening. It's part of the process. And on both sides, and I was on the verge of tears at how, like, I was happy that the members were unified. We
Mhm.
only needed 51%, but you have to go into, if you're going to have any impact, it has to be very, very strong.
Yep.
I didn't expect that strong, but I'm so glad that it was, because it shows the employer that I wasn't being hyperbolic. So I've been talking to the media, both the newspaper and the radio, for the last couple of weeks. And unfortunately, on the 12th of September, the superintendent released I don't know if it was I believe it was a statement to the paper. Originally,
Mhm.
in the past, prior to our strike vote, when the newspaper reached out to the school board, the response they got is that we're relying on prayer. That was the only statement that was released. And then this time, the superintendent released a statement, and I'm just going to pull it up so that I will read it. Let me see here. You might have to edit a pause here. It's going to take me a second.
It's all right. Yep.
Get back to this, go back. Where am
So
I
you were
down?
saying that was like, so that would have been like a 2020 example where they would have said relying on prayer, but this time it was a bit different. Is that
No,
kind of
no, no,
what
no, no,
you're?
no. This was like the prior to us having our strike vote in September. So it was at the very,
Oh,
very beginning of September. Okay. So I'm going to go
okay. I
down to
think I
the
remember
desk
seeing that
here.
actually.
Pardon me?
I think I
Okay.
remember
So
seeing that one. Yeah.
yeah. So in the newspaper, the superintendent stated that, said in a statement, schools have contingency plans in place and expect the strike will have minimal impacts on students and families. However, she acknowledged some programming won't be possible during a strike. And then it said, over many months, we have engaged in respectful negotiations, which it was, with CUPE Local 2559. Despite these efforts in collaboration with the mediator, we have not yet reached an agreement. We are committed to bargaining in good faith, ensuring fair treatment for all while keeping our schools running as smoothly as possible. So that was Thursday evening. I hadn't seen it, but shortly thereafter, my phone exploded with members texting me, trying to call me, emailing me. They were in an uproar with the comment, plans in place and expect the strike will have minimal impacts. Not one of them read it any differently than, we're so undervalued that our absence will have minimal impact on the schools.
Mhm.
But I also started noticing numerous parents speaking out on several pages on Facebook and social media, also being in an up. And I literally was heeding calls and comments until 1:20 a.m. on that Thursday evening, technically Friday morning. The next day, I saw a lot of posts, and basically, I screenshotted them minus the names and what page it was from, no identifying markers, and sent them to our human resources, who I have to say I have an amazing relationship with. She's very, very good. She's kind of stuck in the middle of all this right now. And told her in a nutshell that this is a floodgate that I can no longer close. Like the damage has been done. I was in contact with her over the phone shortly thereafter and was told that, according to the superintendent, that her comments were taken out of context and that the newspaper did not publish her full article. So she did send out an email to staff later that day, which, not surprisingly, was not taken. It was like an apology. Members were irate, and so many of them, like everyone that I've spoken to, has lost all respect. They don't know, they don't see it any other way. So I did notice the Friday afternoon that the newspaper article had been changed, and the paragraph that had apparently been omitted originally was now put back in. So that the 3 paragraphs I read before were still there, but the one that was added was this: while strike notice has not yet been served, we have contingency plans in place and expect relatively minimal disruptions for most students and families. So
That's almost worse.
it's doubling down.
Relatively minimal, right? Is almost worse.
Yeah. Doubling down, and like I'm at a loss for words. I said to the HR representative, I said, I think what she might have meant to say, giving her, is that they would try to minimize the impact on students and families as much as possible, which would have been a totally different message.
Like they're going to do what they can to minimize it, not...
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
you can definitely reword that a lot better.
Exactly. And I said that early Friday morning, so there would have been ample time for things to be changed. But again, the damage was done. So that happened, and then, of course, when, they knew that this is Monday and they knew that Tuesday, we'd be going on strike, parents were contacted, and those who had students in the early entry program, like EAP, were told that until further note, until the strike is happening, that those programs were on hold. And then the worst part, and this happened at both boards, is that parents who had special needs children, which are a lot, were contacted and told that their children would have to stay home. And so some of them, and we had said to people, like, send your kids to school unless it's a life-threatening. We don't want any children to be put in danger, obviously. Some were going to choose to keep them at home, but most of them were, no, my child is going to school. Like, that's the whole point. We're trying to prove a point that these staff members, all of them, whether it's the custodians cleaning up after them, the secretaries, like, everybody is important. And so, but one member who's a member at our local but has a child at the other local was going to send her child to school, but was told that if she were to send her child to school, that children's services would be called on her. And the reason being that she would be knowingly putting her child at risk and putting them in an unsafe situation. Okay. That she came out to me directly, but we heard it over many, many, many of them. And a lot of people sent emails to the superintendent saying, it's a children's right to an education. And the response was that the school has, in a nutshell, has a right to refuse a child from coming if the situation is unsafe. So needless to say, the uproar was even worse. I encourage people to go on Facebook and find the page Don't I Matter, which was a page started by some of these parents and basically describing their children and, in a nutshell, don't I matter. So the minimal impact is now a hashtag. And, it's a minimal impact to students who are AKA normal mainstream students. So, according to some of the comments that our parents are making. So needless to say, we have had a tremendous amount of support from the community. as a whole, and especially the parents. We are fighting, yes, for a wage increase, among other things, but we're fighting for more funding for schools because that funding impacts all the students as well. I've been with the school board for 21 years, like I said, and I've seen the progression of where, you were working one-to-one with a student to now 1-to-4, 1-to-5. I've even heard of
Yeah.
one EA working with 7 students. And some of them have autism and are runners. It's a safety risk for the students who have these, you know, um, different, issues, but it's also a safety issue for all students involved. There's already been situations where we've heard of, from staff where a student was missing. They found they were still in the playground. Their student was, missing in a bathroom or something like that. So
Yeah.
because staff are overworked.
Which
And
I think
so
people don't
if
understand about like they assume, oh, you can't handle 3 kids, but that's not the point at all. So you're looking for
no,
direct attention,
yeah.
and 3 of them are runners. Like, it's literally you're just chasing around if you don't have that proper
Oh
support.
yeah, it's a health and safety. And some of them become aggressive
Hmm.
in their frustration and could take it out on another student. So it has
Hmm.
a lot of even like, cutbacks where our custodians, for example, they have more and more square footage with, because if there's less custodians, we figured it out. It's about they're expected to clean and disinfect, and especially during COVID time, they were expected to do that a classroom in 7 minutes, right? So that's the average of what they're given. So
Wow.
anyway, so we had we were ready, and that didn't help, like I said, and now we're kind of in a transition, waiting to see what happens if the recommendations, when they do come through, if they're voted down, which I'll be very surprised if they're not, unless there's substantial changes in the recommendation. um, then we have, once the recommendations are voted down, then we can issue another 72-hour strike notice,
Okay.
um, which is going to happen if it's voted down. Now, we are not, after the government pulled this, we are not, we wouldn't be surprised if they pull some other thing out of
Yeah,
their
that's
decks.
kind of what I'm anticipating, is just because I almost think like
Um,
you selected, or like the organization selected September as the proper strike point, like strategically, but now they're almost
yeah.
trying to manipulate the system to get their kind of favorable time that you would strike, which
Yes,
is kind of
because
seems like the game that's being played.
yeah, because I mean, we're thinking, like there's a notwithstanding clause, which Doug
Hmm.
Ford tried to do 2 years
Yep.
ago, and in Ontario, we saw how well that worked. And
Hmm.
there's
Not
other
well.
things. The other thing that's strategic as well is that, October is when the legislature is back in, and we could see the minister imposing those recommendations on us regardless of what we voted. Like there's and
Wow. Okay.
um, so we are CUPE National is fighting this to, through the courts, but we know it's going to go to the Supreme Court, but it can take several years. But the biggest thing is that I think that it has awoken, like say you poke the bear, labor unions across the province. We've had so much support that last Saturday we held a rally here in Fort McMurray for education, not just here, it was at 7 other locations in the province. And in Fort McMurray, there were about 1,000 people that showed up, not just members, parents, members of the community. The biggest rally in Fort McMurray's history. And but these rallies were held across the province. Last year, CUPE Alberta and the Alberta Education Employees Committee started a campaign, which is our purple shirts. Okay. And so every Wednesday, we encourage, the last year encouraged members to wear purple, but now wear purple as much as you can. We have signs now, lawn signs for people. We also have like some people in the community who will put purple ribbons around their trees, or some of them have that outdoor lighting on their house and turn those lights purple. Like We have we have full support of our ATA members, so that all the teachers, because we know that they'll be in the same predicament and
Yep.
in a little bit of time. And so many unions came forth, and we can see the power that solidarity has, because just this year, CUPE 1505, which is municipal workers, they were facing layoffs of 400 to 500 members from the
Yep.
municipality. And we all rallied together at a town hall, like a town hall meeting, and we basically blocked off the streets. We had members there from Teamsters, from Unifor, UNA, AUPE, and it worked because the city backed off, and those 400 to 500 people were not laid off. So, and across the province, this has opened up a can of worms with all unions, because they know if they can do it to, the little EAs and Fort McMurray, they can do it with any union across the province. So,
It's almost like a
and they
testing ground from
testing
a
ground, and
government
the government had
perspective,
the
just to
nerve.
see what they can push.
Yeah. And the government had the nerve to say, like on the Friday, I guess they must have been getting a lot of emails or communications from parents or members of the community that, oh, they don't want to get involved. It's between CUPE and the employer. Well, they definitely got involved on the Monday. And then to add insult to injury, I believe it was Wednesday, Danielle Smith had a big press release and was on the news announcing that they had $8.6 billion surplus. And with that, they were going to be building, I believe it's 13 or 30, I can't remember, 1331, pardon me, but new schools, but no money for the staffing of those schools. Also,
Yeah.
and she's now, and I called this a while back, she's now utilizing public funds to open up charter and private schools. So some of that money, some of those schools are charter and private schools. She's using public funds also for healthcare. For example, at certain hospital boards, the Alberta Health Services are going to be replaced by a private entity. So what she's doing, and we've seen this coming for a long time, is trying to underfund public services, but then turn around and say, see, public services don't work, let's privatize everything. So she's the
Yeah.
cause of the problem, but then, trying to replace it. So it's extremely infuriating when 96% of students across Alberta utilize public schools, right? So it's very, very, it's not a union-friendly place to be in Alberta.
Yeah.
So we and I've been telling members for a long time that this is going to be the start of something. I truly believe that our little fight here in Fort McMurray will be one of those things that, years down the line, when they look at the history books, they're going to say, well, that started with that little fight up in Fort McMurray. I truly believe that. What capacity that's going to entail, I don't know, but it's definitely going to have an impact. And the two good things that have come out of this, I have to say, is that one is we've had a lot of members who were kind of apathetic. They're not anti-union, but they weren't really involved and didn't really, if it doesn't impact me, so I don't really care. Now we have a unified front. They understand the power of the union. They understand the importance of the union. They understand the importance of solidarity. And the other thing that it's done, and I've told them for a long time, we have the support of unions across the province, across Canada, but they never saw it because they weren't involved. They're not a union and news nerd like I am, and weren't involved on, from the provincial side and the federal side. Because I participate in CUPE national conventions, and I sit on, resolutions or constitutional committees, and so I'm way more involved than the 99.9% of our members. So they saw that. They saw that when they saw everybody supporting them and being out and coming to our information picket lines. And because we're doing it with the public board, both sides get a lift from seeing the support from the other local. That's the one thing it's done. The other thing it's done is, really shown not only parents in the community, but everyone, what is happening within our schools. I don't think a lot of people realize how bad it's become. how the workers are doing so much more work for the same amount of pay, how dangerous it can be for students. I use that. I don't use it lightly
Hmm.
because we saw just what happened with that poor little guy in, I believe, was Saskatchewan, that went missing. He was autistic, nonverbal, went
Yep.
missing from the school and was found deceased a couple days later, where the other little girl, was found alive in BC. Those are realities that could happen, and unfortunately, or fortunately, sorry, unfortunately, it'll take something like that. Fortunately, it hasn't happened yet. So, and I fear uh, for any student that could happen with. And I also am extremely empathetic to the EAs or any support staff who would be the one working with that student when something like that happens, because it's really, 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 yes, they're protected by liability insurance and all that, but they would feel horrible. But
Yep.
at the same time, if you've got 4 or 5 kids and 3 of them are running,
Or
one takes off,
seven.
what are you supposed to do? Exactly,
Yeah.
right? So, that part of it is, and, it's really frustrating because the employer on numerous occasions, will say, people utilize their sick time too much, blah, blah, blah. But what are they supposed to do? Some of them get bit on, spit on, scratched, whatever, on a daily basis, that they now think that violence is part of their daily work, and it's not. It's
Yeah.
not acceptable. Part of the reason why that violence happens is because there's not enough support in place for those students to be able to, you know, express their needs in a way that's more appropriate, or not be put in situations where they're fearful or misunderstood. And that all comes down to lack of staff, and
Hmm.
nobody can work at the wages. If we take our, for EAs in particular, and I know I focus a lot on that because that's the group that is our largest component, but it impacts everybody. If we take the salary that we make on an hourly basis, if we were to spread that out over a 40-hour week, 52 weeks a year, we technically make $13 an hour, which is less than minimum wage, right? So people do not do this job for the money. They do it
Hmm.
because of the love of the job, but at the same time, they
That
need to
shouldn't be
earn a living
abused.
wage.
That shouldn't be taken
Exactly.
as gospel for not trying to give them benefits. And that's kind of been the forever fight. But I guess I just have one more major question to kind of finish this off here, because we've pretty much talked about some of the job creep stuff, especially like the violence. I would say is probably the biggest one. I wasn't aware of like the EA scale that kind of brings you up to a 4 if you are kind of compensated at a higher rate, still likely much lower than it should be if you have some of those
Yeah.
kind of more core responsibilities. um, but what is kind of your main message now to the employer, and what do you kind of anticipate going forward of once potentially that strike does come to fruition?
um, I want the employer to realize that for years and years and years, they've taken us for granted. Um, Part of the concerns that they have with, people taking sick time, or a lot of that is in their hands.
Hmm.
They have a lot of control over that not being the issue. People having mental health issues, when you're working, having to work 2 and 3 jobs, you don't have a good life to work balance. And if they would worry more about um, how valued all their employees should be, a happy and content employee will do way more than what's expected of them. And the more that they stick to their guns about not doing anything about it and standing up for us, because they have that power as well to go to the government, and they're not doing it. So if they say that we're as valued as they say we are, they need to show that by fighting for us as well, and their students, with the provincial government, because they could do that as well. It shouldn't just be us, right? Right now they can kind of wash their hands of it, and unless they do that, they're going to be losing a lot of staff who can't afford to work for the schools as much as they love it. They're going to be getting people that won't have the experience and that knowledge that they're, that of working with these students. So they're going to find themselves in a situation where either going to have even more lack of staff, or they're going to have some kind of lawsuit on their hand with with a kid having something, serious happen to them. And I think it's, they need to realize that the red flags being waved, they need to stand behind us as well and fight for us as well. Where I see this going, and like I say, it's really tough because we don't want anything negative for students or our teaching staff, which we are 100% on board with, but this needs to happen for, it's kind of starting to shed a light on what's happening behind closed doors, but this needs to be like full force so that people realize the value of having, the educational staff, the out of school care, the, the custodians, the secretary, like there's so many of us involved at the public board. On top of that, their IT people and their payroll people are CUPE. So, it's 1,065 or 1,085 people across both school boards that would be out on the picket line. We have the support of the community, and I think that the more that this goes on and that the government doesn't step in for more funding, the greater the anger is going to be with people in general. And I'm hoping that this has opened up the eyes to a lot of people in our area, which are very strong, usually UCP voters, that we need a change in government next time.
So is there anything else you would like to share for any of the listeners for what's kind of going on?
I think it's important for everyone within your own provincial governments to look at be aware of what your government is doing. Read that fine print because it's slowly eroding our rights. And we don't want to turn into a country where, we lose all those rights. And I think it's extremely important for people to go vote. Don't be apathetic when it comes to elections and voting. It's important to do so. But also at the same time, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank everyone who's shown us support. We've seen support from across the country. And, we want everybody to know that our members are heard and listened to. And if it's going to impact us in Alberta, eventually that can spread across the country. So, buyer beware, watch what you vote for because it could have a lot of impacts further down the line.
Beautiful. Fearless leader Danielle Danis, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.